What's going on, folks? Welcome back to another week of On the Water's Striper Migration Reports. This week, I have Robbie Tartaglia here with me for a little bit of a rundown on what's happening in Buzzards Bay, or what is to come in Buzzards Bay, rather. But I hope you all had a happy, healthy, and fishy holiday weekend. Some recent warmer weather we've seen, more widespread activity across the Striper Coast this week. But as I said, before we dive into all that, I have On the Water's Robbie Tartaglia here. So, Robbie, the reason I brought you on is because you and your father put in a lot of hours on Buzzards Bay each spring. And as those first waves of migratory fish arrive in the bay, what are the areas or environments you're focusing your efforts on, and what techniques do you use to target those early arrivals?
First off, it's an exciting time.
Oh, yeah.
We, as New Englanders, withstood a heavier winter this year, which is good for a few reasons. I think it was, a really good reset on both the fresh and saltwater side of things. It's going to be a very interesting migration this year because of it. So, it's finally time for us here on Cape Cod. And if anybody's been kind of paying attention to the forecast this week, southwest wind, which means fish are coming, which means warm air, warm wind. It's all going to kind of happen here within the next weck. Water temps are rising rapidly. Bait's starting to come in. There's birds flying around, the big birds, the right birds. So to kind of bounce off that, when you're kind of talking about what areas are we looking for and stuff, in Buzzards Bay, most of the fish, if not all of the fish, kind of migrate up the Cleveland Channel coming through Buzzards Bay. And what we really look for is kind of good flats or areas that the fish can kind of just swim out of the channel, out of the current, and kind of look around.
Mosey around.
Around, hang out, follow the bait. So kind of really any good big flats that are near the ledge coming through Buzzards Bay is a really good area to look, specifically in Upper Buzzards Bay, where you're going to have a lot of that bait kind of piling up before moving through the canal. Any fish coming through Buzzards Bay, that is their goal, is to
So do you find that's a lot of river herring, or is it bunker? Because I know like in years past it's been bunker. We didn't really see that so much last year. But.
So early right now, you're definitely going to see a lot of the herring movement. The bunker will come hopefully better than last year. We had a pretty decent movement last year, but that's a little bit later. For right now, definitely the herring movement. So good to kind of bounce off what I was talking about before with the flats and stuff. Another good areas to look around are the river mouths.
Yeah.
Because of the outflow of bait and pouring out of holdover bass too.
Yep.
So in Upper Buzzards Bay, we have a few rivers up there where there are some holdover fish, and you will actually kind of see those fish coming out of those rivers to get on that bait just before the migratory fish. So that is happening there. But yes, the river herring play a huge role in a lot of the early season locations of the striped bass. So definitely pay attention to river mouths, even smaller creeks too.
We got a lot of those on the south side,
doesn't have to be the big river mouths. There's a lot of smaller creeks, smaller outflows that lead into backwater areas. All those small zones, like that's what can kind of separate you from the crowd when the fish kind of do first start to show up. A lot of times you can find small bites all by yourself when these fish are rolling in those areas like that. But yeah, the herring are going to play a big role, and then hopefully soon after the bunker as well.
Well, you mentioned those smaller creeks too, and you want to talk about warm water temperatures. Those smaller creeks with the muddy bottoms are going to warm up a lot faster than some of those larger river systems. So while there might be, holdover stripers piled into some of those larger rivers that get bigger herring runs, the smaller rivers are going to have more comfortable water temperatures for those stripers to feed more actively. So That's a great point. What are some of your favorite approaches for, those stripers on herring? Are you throwing like big, like heavy sink fly lines and stuff like that? Or?
So there's been a little bit of a shift that I've noticed in the past couple of years, and that is the difficulty to actually get these fish on topwater plugs. I've paid very close attention to this, me and my dad and some of my friends. When these migratory fish really come in and are getting on these bait, the plug's going to be effective. You're going to catch fish on it. But man, we got out last year, early season, with Liam, one of our videographers, and my buddy Matt, and we were throwing our plugs into the middle of feeds, and we were getting them, but not as well. And I tied on some smaller soft plastics, and now that's something that we've really started to dial in with the small soft plastics like the Albie snacks or small paddle tails, but really just any small twitch baits like that just get twice the amount of strikes and twice the amount of commitments from those fish. I don't know if they're weary of the topwater stuff now. I doubt it's really that, because they are younger fish that are first kind of showing up.
Right.
I think it's just that they're really starting to key in on the bait more, and the soft plastics just do better, but for being in front of their face, making them not have to put as much effort into chasing down a topwater plug. And I think it's the pauses with the soft plastics that are huge too, because it'll just kind of sit there for a sec and then obviously, move it again and all that.
And you mentioned small, going back to what you mentioned about small river systems, is a lot of the early season bait back there is things like, mud minnows and spearing. So if you have a small 3 to 5 inch soft plastic, spearing being silver sides, and that's something I wrote about actually in the April issue of On the Water, was when those big baits aren't present and you got a lot of fish piled into one area, they might be a little finicky, still cold water temps, first week of May, last week of April. Throw in those smaller paddle tails and even things like epoxy jigs.
Yeah, for
will
sure.
Get those fish to bite early on in the season.
Absolutely. And trust me, I want to throw the big baits.
Oh, yeah.
If I have the chance, I will throw the dock. I will throw glide baits, which I'm going to be really looking into more this year. And a lot of times when you can throw the big baits in some of those staging areas at the mouths of the rivers, where if you see bigger fish kind of moving around, that's when you want to deploy a bigger bait, because they're there for big bait.
Right, glide baits,
they're
magic
looking
swimmers, things
for
like
those
that.
bigger herring, especially when there's no other bait around and they're kind of just there like looking for the bigger bait. That's when you can get out your dock. That's when you can get out a bigger soft plastic and really try to get those bigger fish to commit, because they do come early. They do. Even with all the movement of the smaller fish under the birds and all that stuff, there are big fish around. They are coming. They come early. There's just not as many of them, and they're harder to find, but they are there if you look in the right places. So,
well, that's great news. I think we're probably just a few days away from the Buzzards Bay bass bite really starting to heat up. We've had fish off of the south side of Martha's Vineyard and kind of slowly trickling their way into Buzzards Bay and the south side of Cape Cod. So, Robbie, I wish you and your dad the best of luck out there to start the season, and here's to a strong spring start for the south side of Massachusetts.
Absolutely. You guys, if anyone has any questions with Buzzards Bay related intel or anything like that, you can always reach out to me and my dad. We're very friendly out there on the water, and we hope to see a lot of you guys out there. It's going to be a good season. I think this colder winter is going to help out a lot.
I agree. Thanks for coming on, Robbie.
Yeah,
I appreciate
absolutely,
it,
Matt.
man.
Thank you, dude.
On the Water Striper Migration Reports are brought to you by Grundens. The Grundens brand was born almost 100 years ago in the small fishing village of Grundens, Sweden, when Carl A. Grunden began making waterproof oilskins to protect fishermen from the harsh conditions of the North Sea. Today, Grundens continues to bring that same level of quality and care to their extensive line of technical apparel for commercial and recreational fishermen. I've been fishing in Grundens Bedrock wading boots and Vector zip stocking foot waders, as well as the Portal Gore-Tex wading jacket. I actually had it on in the rain last night. Water beads up, rolls right off the jacket. It's great. It's kept me safe. It's kept me dry, kept me comfortable, no matter the conditions. I'm really looking forward to breaking them in as the striper season gets underway. The Gore-Tex Portal wading jacket is packed with waterproof features like neoprene sleeve cuffs, a drop hood with a high collar that shields me from harsh winds and pelting rain, and it is specifically designed to perform in cold weather and deep wading situations, so I can keep casting the stripers through the elements from early spring through late fall. There's truly no better fit for a Northeast surf caster. Check out all their wading gear and more at Grundens.com. Grundens, we are fishing. All right, so as mentioned, there's been a lot of fish movement and heightened activity across the southern portions of the Striper Coast this week. Keeping that in mind, let's take a look at our most recent migration map. So not to sound like a broken record here, but while striper fishing remains closed inside the Chesapeake Bay until May 16th, there has been plenty of action on the oceanfront beaches, places like Assateague Island, where anglers are catching big black drum alongside stripers up to around 30 inches. Further south along the Virginia-Maryland state line, closer to there have been some red drum in the mix as well to keep things interesting. Guys are catching them on soft plastics, crab, chunked bunker, things like that. But we're going to focus on the areas just a little bit north of there as those fish continue to pour out of the Chesapeake Bay. So just north of Maryland, there are big bass running the Delaware River to spawn. Meanwhile, in Delaware Bay and off the beaches of southern New Jersey, it's a similar story to the Maryland surf. You've got striped bass and large black drum being caught by anglers soaking clams, not only in the bay, but also on the oceanfront beaches. We heard of that from Grumpy's earlier this week, Grumpy's Tackle. Scott from Grumpy's Tackle was on here last week talking about how they were waiting on those first fish to show up in the surf, and it happened just days after his first report. So that was great news. That action has started to trickle to the oceanfront beaches of southern to central New Jersey as well. We've heard of a lot of slot-sized fish being taken on clams out front. So even though the back bays should still be fishing well, consider looking to the ocean beaches and inlets as we approach the new moon on April 27th. By the first week of May, there should be some spawned out 40-inch class fish coming up from the Chesapeake, reaching those beaches of northern New Jersey. And speaking of northern New Jersey, Jersey, the bunker bite continued to fire on all cylinders in Raritan Bay and the area rivers this week, where bass from schoolie size to 30 pounds plus are being caught on just about anything you throw at them. We're hearing of live bunker, metal lips, paddle tails and swim shads, flutter spoons, you name it, they're eating it. And also worth noting, the first bluefish of the season have been reported in New Jersey. So if you're fishing natural baits or soft plastics, be warned. You know, those bluefish like to chop it off, whether it's a bunker tail or a paddle tail, right behind the hook shank. So if you're using soft baits or natural baits, just fair warning, there's bluefish around. So slightly north of New Jersey, along the north shore of Long Island, the bass bite has really picked up in the western Long Island Sound. We've had some activity there over the past several weeks, but now we're seeing slot-sized fish and more consistent action from bass in the 20 to 25-pound class. We'll hear more on that in a bit from one of our guests. The South Shore, on the other hand, the striper action has drastically improved, with more bunkers showing up in places like Jamaica Bay. And much like Raritan Bay, there are fish ranging from schoolie size to around 25 pounds, and they're also being caught on a mix of live bunker, flutter spoons, swim shads, and metal lip swimmers. The fish are clearly pushing east, although it's been a slow bleed. We've had reports of schoolie to slot-sized fish as far east as Great South Bay, just not in large numbers. Most of the action has been reserved to skinny marsh waters and deep channels around bay bridges. We could use some more bunker along eastern points of the South Shore to get those fish feeding as they continue to head toward Montauk and around the eastern tip of Long Island. Pushing just north into the southern New England area, the big news last week was the arrival of migratory schoolies hitting western Rhode Island. Not much has changed on that front. We're continuing to hear more reports of smaller fish coming in from offshore and heading into salt ponds and places like Narragansett Bay. Meanwhile, back in the Long Island Sound, western Connecticut beaches are fishing very similarly to Long Island's North Shore. The bass bite has been great for slot-class stripers, with a few overslot fish in the mix as those migratory bass continue to press east toward the Connecticut River, where many of them will likely be making a pit stop to fatten up on river herring and hopefully, in a few weeks, big schools of bunker. Moving north up the striper coast, we're still patiently waiting for some migratory fish to show themselves in places like Buzzards Bay and the south coast of Cape Cod. There were rumors of some migratory bass being caught in Buzzards Bay and in the Cape Cod Canal this week. We didn't get any verification on that, so it's totally possible that did happen, but I have been looking out for them in a lot of my back bay spots. No dice yet. There have been plenty of river herring around, but I'm not seeing the schools of silver sides that we're used to yet either in those shallow estuaries and marsh areas. My guess is by the time the new moon hits on April 27th, we'll be seeing more bait and those first migratory fish packing into the estuaries, marshes, and salt ponds, much like Rhode Island anglers are currently experiencing. So it took a little while compared to years past when we had warmer spring weather, but the bass bite in western Long Island Sound has drastically improved over the past week or so, with fish from schoolie class to around 25 pounds hitting swimming plugs, plastics, and even topwaters. So chiming in from Long Island's North Shore this week is On the Water's very own Nick Cancelliere.
Hey Matt, how you doing, buddy? This is Nick, and here's your western Long Island Sound striper report. So over the past 2 weeks, the fishing has been really solid. There are a ton of holdover striped bass around, and they're actively feeding, even on top water at times, which is pretty wild considering that water temperatures have been mostly under 50 degrees. Most of the fish have been in the low 20 to low 30-inch range. It's mostly slot-sized fish. They'll either just be a hair over or a hair under at most. No micros, and we haven't really seen any big ones yet, but the action's been steady. The main bait around has been spearing. You'll even see stripers boiling on them at times. My favorite way to target them has been with Albie snacks for the most part when they're doing those topwater feeds. It's super visual and it's really effective. Looks just like a dead bait fish on the surface. But for the most part, the kind of go-to this time of year has been plugs like the Rapala X-Rap or Daiwa SP Minnow. Those are consistent. Those will probably get the most bites when nothing else is working. You could also go to soft plastic paddle tails. One that gets a special shout out from me is the Tsunami Sand Eel, which has been pretty deadly this spring. And I've also been getting them on glide baits, particularly the one that Jimmy wants to buy from me. Not going to happen, Jimmy. Sorry. So looking ahead, I'm expecting the fishing to pick up some more. We got some consistent warm temperatures ahead, which is great. As the water warms, we should hopefully see more bait come in the form of bunker, adult bunker, peanut bunker, and hopefully we should start getting some of those large migratory fish that have entered the Raritan. Hopefully they'll make their way up here and we can start getting into some bigger hits. But yeah, that's the latest. That's everything from the western Long Island Sound. Thanks, Matt, and see you out there.
On the Water Striper Migration Reports are also brought to you by Quantum. Stripers are back, and so is Quantum with their new Benchmark and Strive spinning reels. I had a chance to fish the surf with the Benchmark 6000 during the fall striper migration last year, and it is a true workhorse. Performs great in all kinds of surf, but especially in that heavy, rough surf that you get during the fall run and even during the early spring when all those storm systems are moving through. The 6,000 size Quantum Benchmark boasts 35 pounds of fish-stopping drag power, and like all Benchmark models, it is highly resistant to heavy water pressure and sand or salt intrusion, which makes it a great choice for fishing big surf. The Strive 3000 spinning combo, which includes the same water-resistant qualities, was a top performer from the kayak and boat when stripers and bluefish fed alongside schools of large bonito last fall. The fully sealed Strive spinning reel is complemented by a sensitive but durable graphite composite rod with a stainless steel guide train, so I can focus on fighting fish with confidence instead of worrying about chipped, scratched, or corroded guides. To learn more about how Quantum is setting the new standard in saltwater fishing, check out quantumfishing.com. Quantum, tested beyond limits. All right, thanks, Nick. We're glad to hear you're finding some more consistent action in the sound, especially on top water. That's a great treat, considering water temperatures have been hovering close to 50 degrees. Getting those bass on top is not always easy in the colder water temps in the high 40s and stuff. But like Nick said, a lot of bait down there, a lot of spearing, and casting something like an Albie Snacks or a subtle soft plastic right into those quick boil feeds on top water has been the key to success. Fingers crossed, though, that you start to see some adult bunker and peanut bunker in your area over the next week or so to really get those fish feeding. Jumping up the coast just a little bit, our next guest this week is a kayak fishing guide who has been finding good holdover activity for a few weeks now. He's currently focused on fishing where bait is most abundant around the herring runs in Rhode Island. Let's kick it over to Dustin Stevens of Rhode Island Kayak Fishing Adventures. Dustin?
Hi guys, I'm Dustin Stevens with Rhode Island Kayak Fishing Adventures. Matt and On the Water crew, thank you so much for having me on. The striper activity over the past few weeks have been pretty consistent. I've been catching holdover fish, but there have been some very, very credible reports of some fresh migratory fish already being caught in the state. So that's a great sign for things to come, as everything is pretty much firing up right on schedule. As far as forage, the only thing I'm really focused on right now are the herring runs. Whether you're fishing for your first fresh migratory fish of the year or you're still targeting holdovers, fishing around those herring runs in the state would definitely be your best bet. I'm usually trying to mimic, the herring or that smaller bait fish profile with like a 3 to 5 inch plastic. So generally something like, this Game On plastic here, this 5-incher, been catching fish for me since December, this exact one. So this is definitely a good tool to have in the arsenal. Also, this is, I think it's a 4-inch gravity tackle paddle tail, which has worked for me very well so far. And it has a nice color to it, kind of mimicking those herrings. So definitely something to think about. If you're not getting any action on the larger presentations, you can always scale down with like a little guy like this little 3.5-incher by Game On. It has worked out for me very well. As far as size, the only, I'm usually getting the 15 to 25-inch schoolies, and that's whether I'm catching holdovers or this time of year when the first wave of migratory bass show up, I'm usually catching those schoolie-sized fish. However, over the past few weeks, there have been some nice slot fish caught, and I've even caught a nice 40-inch class fish, as well as a couple guys that I know. So you never know what's going to be out there, even though you can pretty much expect to catch schoolies this time of year. Over the next few weeks, I expect things to really fire up nicely. We should have a lot more migratory bass show up. We'll also have a lot of options for forage species, whether it be your squid, your peanut bunker, your silver side, your bay anchovies, and don't forget about those herring runs, even when we get the other stuff. So the next, week or two should really be fired up, and I expect a great striper season here. Again, Matt, thank you so much for having me on. I look forward to seeing a lot of you guys on the water, and good luck to everybody this striper season.
So Dustin hit the nail right on the head. River herring remain the #1 forage fish for stripers, not only in Rhode Island, but southern New England as a whole this week. And while there haven't been a ton of larger fish in the mix, that's bound to change as migratory schoolies have already been in Rhode Island for about a week now. Over the next week, southern New Englanders can expect to see more life in backwaters in the form of silversides, peanut bunker, and hopefully some of those big adult bunker. We haven't heard much about squid just yet, but as we've learned in past years, when those squid pile into Narragansett Bay, it really ignites the fishing from both resident fish and those recent arrivals. That's it for our regional reports, so let's get some insight on the big picture from our friends over at Canyon Runner. On the Water Striper Migration Reports are brought to you by Canyon Runner, powered by VM. The Canyon Runner virtual captain and tracking map is coming soon to inshore anglers chasing stripers and all other inshore species for as low as $99 a year. It serves as your co-captain, providing weather, water temperature, and safety information with a built-in warning system and so much more. Gain the ability to track each and every member and pro staff boat in real time on one page, one map, one website, one helm. Know where the fleet is at all times and extend your network of buddy boats in real time. Learn more at www.canyonrunner.com. Canyon Runner is doing a 1-month free trial for their inshore mapping system. If you want to take advantage of this exciting offer, email info@canyonrunner.com for more details. Take it away, Canyon Runner.
All right, Matt. Thanks a lot. Welcome, folks, to another session of the Striper Podcast. We are going to look at the holiday week leading into Easter. What we had finally was some really good weather. And good weather, we mean warm weather. I mean, all the fishing, as we know, still back in the bays and the rivers and the creeks. We're not that worried about sea conditions offshore yet, but we had the weather. We're going to go over that in a second. Here's, as you know, now that you've looked at our Canyon Runner map, a lot of it's weather. And we always start with that. We start and finish with the weather. And we're going to talk about what's looking to be a tranquil week coming up and really a nice spring pattern. We always zoom out. We want to look at the big picture. We want to see what's coming across the country. And if you look, there's highs popping up everywhere and a lot less red like there was 3 weeks ago, a lot less even greens and yellows, just a lot of blue, which means the isobars, which means the wind are further and further apart. You can see another big high settling under us Tuesday, another to the west. And look at this. Look at this Wednesday in the morning. It's really tranquil weather setting in. You see it right here. Again, we'll use New York only because it's kind of right in the middle of everybody. But if you look at the seven, look at this. It's cold. But look at the nighttime temperatures. 48 for Sunday night. It's 52 as a low for Monday. Monday's kind of be a cold, dank day, but okay, it doesn't warm up that warm, but the key is the night times now aren't getting that cold. And then look at the rest of the week. So that's going to set up to give us what we need. We're looking at water temperature. Here's our full water temperature chart. By the way, anyone interested in where the first eddy might show up, there's a nice big one out here, but that's not for this conversation. Let's talk about what we got in water temperatures. Down in Chesapeake, it's more than warm enough now. There's fish basically picked everywhere. Around the bridges, up around the creeks. We've gone over this now. All the other calls, the stuff's going to trickle out from the estuaries, the tributaries, creeks, down the rivers, and out in the bay. There's plenty going on up and down the Chesapeake. The same applies here for the Delaware. Now, if you look, it's still hovering around 49 degrees. Now, some of these days it was warmer. Chesapeake, it's all warmer now. Some of these days we had a little bit of warmer temperature, but then on the incoming tide pulls all this ocean temperature, as you can see, look, we're still 46, 47. One of our pro staff was out here black fishing during the week. He had 46, 47 degrees. So when you got that strong incoming tide, it's just going to cool everything down again. And it's why back into these creeks and bays, and we'll get into this in a second, you can see that's where all the action is. We're going to keep going north on the water temp just to see what's going to warm up. Here we are up into the Raritan. And there's a kind of a tale of two cities here. It's still 46 degrees at the opening. So obviously the water portion here, it's cold. Look, this was on the 18th. This was on Friday. It was 46 degrees. That was it. Now, the interesting thing, on Thursday, the water was in the 51, 52 degrees. And I'll touch on that in a little bit, but we had some really good bass fishing on bunker up in here on Thursday, where it was 51, 52, 53 degrees. There's bunkers. It was good. Then it cooled off, and it cooled off and stayed off, and it stayed slow. But now as we go back in here, back in Jamaica Bay, around JFK Airport, very shallow in here. It warms up quick, chill. So yes, it gets cold on these temperatures right here are from the middle of the week. But as soon as the outgoing tide comes in, as soon as that sun that we're looking at gives a few hours in the morning, it's warming up quick and there's really good fishing in here. Unfortunately, you're still looking at the mid 40s here. There are small bass now, though. Small bass starting to trickle out. And all along these edges here, Connecticut, even central and eastern Connecticut, there are small bass starting to be caught. Same thing with the North Shore of Long Island. Still really nothing out here. A couple of our pro staff are commercial fishermen. They're getting ready to set nets. There's bass out there just sitting there kind of dormant. There's not much going on. So let's talk about actual reports. So here's trips from this week. We'll start south to north again. Again, we filled you in on what's going on here in the Chesapeake and the Delaware. Same as usual. There's not much going on out in the middle of the bay because the water's still cold. What was interesting, I'm going to open up our fishing notes. By the way, folks, anyone who's interested, these fishing notes are something that's pretty prevalent on our inshore map. We are announcing right now that we're going to give you folks access to the inshore map for free for a few weeks. Again, the inshore map means an inshore map. Once you get 10 miles offshore, you won't see our offshore boats, but all these notes, it's a big part of the inshore map. Our pro staff will interact more and post more, and Mod Squad's been like really leading the charge on that. Now, this note right here, I want you to look at this one. Interesting thing that happened. The fish kind of went back up in the creeks. We had the warm weather. You would think it would be all bays and out in the ocean all last week. Well, a lot of folks, and I was talking to Freddie Gambo, another pro staff, they think it's now kind of the migration back in from the ocean, the ocean fish that are dormant. Remember last week we talked about some guys who were out here bluefin fishing, or at least looking for bluefin, ended up hooking striped bass. Those fish seem to be moving up into the bays and creeks now. They're on the move to spawn. That's what Mod Squad noticed. He was back all the way up in here. Which day was this? That was on the 18th. He was back up in an area he fished a month ago. So back in the middle of March, he was up in here. Then last week, he was able to come out, the week prior, say the second week of April, he was fishing all out here under the bridges, had some great nights. Well, this week leading up to the 20th, he actually had to move back up into the creek. Now, Freddie Gambo and a couple of our other pro staff up here in the Raritan kind of noticed the same thing. Just FYI, these are some of the folks just running around looking for the bluefins. We had a couple boats leave Manasquan, Belmar, run up the beach. Nothing on the beach to speak of. There's nothing on the beach to speak of to be caught. But up in here, same thing happened. There was on Thursday, Fatback Charters, one of our pro staff out of New York. Again, it was Thursday. He was in there. He found very warm water. There were 12 for 15 on really nice bass on live bunker. If we put over the NOAA chart, you can see where we are here. He caught the bunker right around these buoys right here, came up in here, saw the bird, saw the bass, had a really nice bite. Now, the next few days, nothing really went on. Their fish were there. Guys were trolling. They couldn't find the bait. But talking to a couple people Sunday morning, the fish are kind of migrating. Some of them are migrating back up in here. It's a very kind of like, it's an odd situation that goes on. You've got some of these fish that moved out, and they're just getting acclimated to this area. You now have the ocean fish moving into spawn. But listen, the days that are slow now, the folks are still catching 2 to 4 to 5 bass. The days that are good, you have these 12 to 15 days. And remember what we're talking about. I'm going to put the satellite map back on here. Remember about the water temp. Like up in here where it's really shallow, it's staying a lot more consistent. They're catching every day in here now. On the 18th, they were fishing the afternoon. The morning bite was good on the 19th. It's good fishing up in here. A lot of trips are going up in here. Really, if you look, this is one of the better areas. This is probably the area that produced the best. Interesting, this was trolling. Trolling mojos. They didn't have the live bunker. They didn't found them. They caught more than enough on the troll. And as we move east, unfortunately, we mentioned this. We've got a lot of activity. Well, not a lot. This is the beginning of the activity. Boats looking around, folks putting their boats in the water. They're spending half a day looking. They're just not seeing it yet. Not seeing what you need to see. The water's just not warm enough. The bait's not there, but it is going to happen. I mean, it is like any second now the thing should explode. This weather that we're talking about is all we're going to need. The ocean fish will quickly move and spawn. They'll be back out again. And in about a week, we'll see all this area turn on. We'll have good fishing as well. It really is the time of year where you have one day that's great. You have the other day that's slow. You have days we had, even on Thursday, there was about 50 to 75 boats fishing here. Friday and Saturday, hundreds of boats. That much pressure when the fish are like this isn't going to be great, but probably someday this week, probably by Friday, Saturday, you will see 200 boats in this area and they'll all be catching. And again, down here, the nighttime, I want to swing back down. Remember what's going on in these bays, up all in these areas, up in Kettle Creek, up in the Matitaconk, all these little fingers and tributaries in Tom's River. The fish are all in here. You just want to put in the effort. If you really want to put in the effort, nighttime on the bridges are still producing. It has been believe it or not, it's been a month now. It's a long season. This is our fourth podcast. It's only going to get better and better. And we're going to get, after this holiday, traditionally, you're going to see everyone really focus on this. We're basically 9 days away from May 1st, and you'll have a lot of coverage. And we'll start to see a little bit of stuff trickling out in the ocean. Don't predict it's going to be this week, but this week we're going to see pretty much every other day being really, really good fishing. Did find it a little unusual that the bunker produced so well, so keep your eyes out, get that bait. But when it was good in there this week, it was good on anything. Guys were casting at them, guys were trolling mojos, guys were trolling bugs, guys were using live bunker. And the same thing's going to apply here. We had a little bit, some folks have asked, just a little bit of activity up here, nothing much in the East River stuff. But with how good it was in here, I'd really put the focus here if you want to stay on that side. Folks, it's really time now where it's going to turn on for everyone up and down this line. And we're about a week away from it happening here. And by the way, I'm going to finish with this. Like I said, we have a lot of our pro staff and the people we chat to on the commercial side. They're out there. They start setting nets soon for a couple of different species. They're out there just running their nets. And when they run their nets, they can see what's there. There's a ton of bass just sitting out here, just like the bass that were down here when the guys were looking around for bluefins. There's plenty of bass up in here too. That's going to turn on. It was some amazing fishing last fall. You'll have it again as well. Still a few weeks away from up here. We'll start talking about that soon. Well, folks, we hope you had a great week of fishing. You got a great week coming up, and we'll talk to you soon. Matt, back to you, and thank you very much.
On the Water striper migration reports are also brought to you by Garmin Marine. Whether you're setting up to hold position on a rip line or inching your way toward a boulder-strewn beach, Garmin's force crack and trolling motor is up to the task in any saltwater environment. With autopilot features like anchor lock, cruise control, and route following, which can all be controlled via wireless remote, this bow-mounted trolling motor is built to help you make the most of your inshore fishing trips, regardless of the conditions. The force crack and trolling motor is available in a range of shaft lengths from 48 to 90 inches for bay boats, center consoles, down east style hulls, and more. Learn more about the force crack and trolling motor and everything Garmin Marine has to offer at www.garmin.com. Garmin, engineered on the inside for life on the outside. All right, big thanks to both of our regional report contributors, Nick and Dustin. You can check out both of their pages on social media by visiting the links in the description. And of course, big thanks to Canyon Runner for providing us with the big picture after a week of slightly warmer weather across the coast. While there have been some stripers caught in Buzzards Bay this week, anglers in southern Massachusetts are still waiting for that solid push of migratory fish. I spotted a ton of river herring and ospreys out front on the south-facing beaches of Cape Cod last week. So if I had to guess, we're just days away from seeing them in our estuaries and bays in some better numbers. Keep in mind also that On the Water Striper Cup begins on May 1st, and that is coming up fast. This 20-week catch-and-release-based striped bass fishing tournament awards weekly prizes from Yeti, Bubba, Penn, Costa Sunglasses, and Turtle Box Audio just for catching fish and submitting your photos and measurements online. You can learn all about the tourney and sign up at stripercup.com. For more migration updates, follow On the Water Magazine and Striper Cup on Instagram. That is all we've got for this week's Striper Migration Report. I'm going to go rig up my rods and get to casting. Thanks for watching, everybody. Tight lines.